The funeral was quiet, the kind of quiet that sits heavy in your chest. People huddled under gray skies, their heads low, their hands trembling. Officer Daniel's coffin lay at the front, draped with the flag he had sworn to protect. But no one noticed Max. Max, the golden retriever with the soft brown eyes and the heart too big for his small body. He wasn't just sitting beside the coffin like people expected. He was barking. Loud, sharp, desperate. His paws scratched at the wood, again and again as if he was trying to dig through it. Some folks whispered, "Poor thing, he's heartbroken." Others just shook their heads, pulling their coats tighter against the cold. Max didn't care. He barked until his voice cracked, then barked some more. His whole body shook with the effort. His eyes, usually full of joy, were wide with something else now. Fear. Panic. A little girl tugged her mother's hand. "Mommy, why's the dog so scared?" The mother knelt, brushing hair from the girl's face. "He misses his owner, sweetie. He doesn't understand." But Max understood. He knew something was wrong. Deep down in the place where instincts live, he knew this wasn't how it was supposed to be. Officer Ruiz, Daniel's longtime partner, stood a few feet away watching Max. She wiped her nose and tried to steady her breathing. Her hand trembled. As she placed it over her badge, she turned to the police chief. "Sir, maybe we should check the chief cut her off." "Ruiz, he's just grieving, leave it be." Ruiz swallowed hard. Maybe they were right, maybe it was just grief. But as Max let out a high-pitched whine, pawing harder, she felt a sick twist in her gut. Max refused to move. He planted himself like a stone, barking until his chest heaved and his legs buckled. Two officers approached, trying to gently pull him back. "Come on, boy," one said softly. "Let him rest now." Max snarled, not out of anger but pure terror. He pulled free, racing back, to the coffin, pressing his nose against the seam where the lid met the base. His nails scratched the wood, frantic. The preacher cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to continue the service. His voice shook as he spoke about loyalty, sacrifice, and love. But Max's cries drowned it all out. Ruiz couldn't take her eyes off him. She knelt beside him, brushing her fingers through his fur. "What is it, Max? What are you trying to tell us?" Max licked her hand, then barked again, this time softer, almost pleading. Ruiz looked up at the chief, her voice breaking. "Sir, I think we need to—" The chief's face hardened. "Enough, Ruiz, finish the ceremony." Max's eyes followed her as she stood up, his body quivering. He let out a low, mournful howl that silenced the crowd. Even the wind seemed to stop. Ruiz's heart shattered. She wanted to believe Max was just mourning. She wanted to believe there was nothing wrong. But that howl, it sounded like a cry for help. After the final prayers, the crowd slowly drifted away, their footsteps crunching on the gravel. Flowers wilted in the cold breeze. Only Max stayed, curled up beside the coffin, refusing food, refusing water. An old woman approached Ruiz, her face lined with sorrow. She patted Ruiz's shoulder. "Dogs know things we don't, child. Don't ignore him." Ruiz nodded, her throat too tight to answer. She turned back to Max, who was now resting his head against the coffin, his body still. But his eyes were wide, open, staring, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for someone to believe him. That night, long after everyone had gone, Ruiz sat in her car, unable to drive away. She watched Max through the window, her heart heavy with doubt. "Maybe he's right," she whispered to herself. "Maybe something's not right." Max lifted his head, sensing her eyes on him, and gave a single soft bark, like a whisper carried by the wind. Ruiz squeezed the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She knew she couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. Tomorrow she would come back. Tomorrow she would open the coffin. Because sometimes the ones who can't speak are the ones screaming the loudest. Max didn't sleep that night. He stayed by the coffin, trembling, whimpering, staring. Morning came, cold and gray, but still he didn't move. Officer Ruiz stepped out of her car, the coffee in her hand growing cold as she watched him. Her chest ached. She thought she saw him shiver, but it wasn't from the cold. It was from fear. As mourners started arriving again, Max stood up and began barking. Louder this time, sharper, the kind of barking that cuts through bone. People flinched, heads turned. A woman gasped, covering her mouth. "Why's he doing that?" An old man shook his head. "He knows something we don't." Max threw his whole body against the coffin, paws scratching, nails scraping against the wood. He barked so hard that his voice cracked, but he didn't stop. His tail wasn't wagging. His ears were pinned back. His body screamed panic. Ruiz knelt down, reaching for him. "Max, buddy, it's okay. It's okay." Max spun, barking straight into her face, then darted back to the coffin. His nails clicked on the floor as he jumped and scratched. 2 officers approached quickly. One said, "We have to get him away from the coffin." The other nodded. "He's disturbing the ceremony." Ruiz stood up, putting herself between Max and the officers. "Wait, let's just wait." But the chief shook his head from across the room, giving a sharp signal. The officers moved in. They grabbed Max's collar gently at first, trying to pull him back. Max yelped, twisting his body, slipping out of their grip. He lunged forward, barking so loudly that it echoed off the walls. One officer muttered, "What's wrong with this dog?" Max didn't care how many hands grabbed him. He didn't care about the shouting. His heart was locked on that coffin. His eyes begged someone, anyone, to listen. Ruiz's voice cracked. "Please, look at him. This isn't normal." The chief's voice boomed across the room. "Control the animal." Max kicked and fought as more officers moved in. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't mean. He was desperate. He barked between sobs, each sound more heartbreaking than the last. The little girl from yesterday clutched her doll tighter. "Mommy, he's crying." The mother wiped her eyes, whispering, "I know, baby, I know." Max finally collapsed from exhaustion, his sides heaving, but his eyes never left the coffin. Tears mixed with the dust on his golden fur. Ruiz knelt beside him again, stroking his head. "I hear you, Max," she whispered. "I hear you." The officers backed off, unsure, unsettled. Nobody had the heart to pull Max away anymore. The preacher tried to continue the service, but his words faltered. No one really listened. All they could hear was Max's soft whimpers rising and falling like broken waves. Ruiz sat beside him, her hand never leaving his fur. She could feel his heartbeat pounding against her palm, fast and scared. She leaned close and whispered, "You're not just mourning, are you?" Max whimpered louder, pressing his nose against the coffin, pawing at the side again. He was weaker now, but still trying, still fighting. Ruiz looked up, her eyes locking with the chief's across the room. She saw it then, a flicker of something. Fear? Guilt? She wasn't sure, but it made her stomach turn. She stood up, facing him. "Sir, I think we need to open it." Gasps rippled through the room. The chief's face hardened. "Stand down, Ruiz." "That's an order." Max let out a heartbreaking howl, low and long, a sound that cracked through every heart present. A few people started crying again, harder this time. Ruiz clenched her fists. Her mind raced. She had no proof. Only a dog's broken heart screaming, "For help." The chief barked, "Get that dog out of here before he causes more trouble." 2 new officers stepped forward, their faces grim. Max backed against the coffin, growling low. It wasn't a threat. It was fear. Ruiz stepped between them. "Touch him, and you answer to me." Everyone froze. The room felt like it wasn't breathing. The officers looked at each other, then stepped back. The preacher cleared his throat. Maybe the Lord is trying to tell us something." The chief's jaw tightened. He turned away, muttering under his breath. Ruiz knelt beside Max again, whispering, "Hold on, buddy. I'll find a way." Max rested his head on her knee, shivering. His breathing was shallow now, his body giving out, but his spirit wouldn't let go. As the service ended and people slowly left, Ruiz stayed behind with Max. They sat, there alone with the coffin, surrounded by silence and the weight of a truth nobody wanted to see. She looked down at him and promised, "Tomorrow, Max. I swear, tomorrow I'll find out what you're trying to say." Max closed his eyes, trusting her, but his paw still rested against the coffin, as if he couldn't bear to leave Officer Daniels alone. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the empty room. Tomorrow, everything would change. Ruiz stayed on the floor next to Max, her hand still resting on his head. His body was cold, trembling from exhaustion, but his paw never left the coffin. The rest of the funeral moved on around them. People lowered their heads, wiping their tears, pretending not to hear the faint whimpers coming from Max's throat. The preacher spoke about bravery, sacrifice, and peace. His voice was soft, steady, but in Ruiz's ears, it sounded hollow. Empty. She leaned down closer to Max, whispering, "I know you're trying to tell me something." Max opened his tired eyes, letting out a small broken bark. It barely echoed, but it hit Ruiz like a punch. She stood up slowly, looking around. People avoided her gaze. Nobody wanted to meet her eyes. Nobody wanted to face the storm building inside that golden retriever. Ruiz wiped her hands on her pants and walked toward the chief. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Sir, I really think we should check." The chief didn't even look at her. He just shook his head. "Let it go, Ruiz, you're emotional." "I know what grief looks like," she said, louder this time. This isn't grief." The chief turned to her, his face hard. "One more word, and you're off this case. Understand?" Ruiz swallowed the lump in her throat. She nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." But in her heart she didn't agree, not one bit. Behind her, Max let out another whine, pawing weakly at the coffin again. A woman in the back whispered to her husband, "It's unnatural, the way that dog's acting." The husband just shook his head. Sometimes grief makes animals do strange things. But Ruiz knew better. This wasn't strange. This was fear. She walked back to Max, sitting beside him again. She didn't care about orders anymore. She needed to be near him. Needed to feel that she wasn't the only one hearing the silent screams. Ruiz stroked Max's fur. "Hang on, buddy," she murmured. "I believe you." Max pressed closer, letting out a low whimper like he was begging her not to leave him alone. Ruiz blinked back tears. She looked around at the other officers standing stiff and silent, their faces blank. She felt anger rising inside her. She stood again, facing the crowd. "Doesn't anyone see it? He's trying to tell us something." People shifted uncomfortably, whispering. The chief barked out, "Ruiz, sit down." Max barked too, a sharp, desperate sound, as if agreeing with her. Ruiz didn't move. She planted her feet, heart hammering. "Officer Daniels was my partner. He was the best man I ever knew. If Max thinks something's wrong, then I believe him." The chief's face turned red. "Enough. If you say another word, you're suspended." Max whimpered, pressing his whole body against the coffin, eyes pleading. Ruiz's fists clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tear the coffin open herself. But instead, she sat down beside Max again, tears burning her eyes. "Hang on, boy," she whispered. "I'll find a way." The service dragged on. People stood, heads bowed, pretending everything was fine. But the air was heavy with something no one wanted to name. Fear. Doubt. The little girl clutched her mother's hand, whispering, "Mommy, the dog's sad." Her mother nodded. "I know, honey, he misses his friend." The little girl's voice was soft but clear. "I think he's trying to tell us something." Ruiz looked up sharply, hope flickering in her chest. But the mother just pulled her daughter closer, shushing her. Like everyone else, she was too scared to listen. Max let out another broken whimper, louder this time. Ruiz leaned close, whispering, "I'm here. I'm listening." The crowd moved to the gravesite next, slow and silent. The coffin was loaded onto the cart. Max tried to follow, but his legs wobbled. Ruiz bent down, lifting him into her arms. "It's okay, buddy. I got you." He was lighter. Then she remembered, like the fear had eaten away his strength. At the gravesite, people circled around. The preacher spoke words of farewell. The first shovelful of dirt hit the coffin with a hollow thud. Max let out a sharp, heart-wrenching bark. Ruiz tightened her grip. Tears blurred her vision. The chief stood a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes cold. Ruiz took a shaky breath. "Just hold on, Max. I'll fix this. I promise." Max pressed his head against her chest, his breathing ragged, his body trembling. The crowd drifted away slowly, leaving Ruiz and Max alone by the fresh grave. The wind picked up cold and sharp, but Ruiz didn't move. She sat there with Max in her arms, staring at the mound of dirt covering the coffin. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow, no matter what it costs me, I'm coming back." Max gave one soft bark, barely louder, then a sigh and closed his eyes. The night crept in, cold and heavy, but Ruiz stayed, waiting, listening. The night was heavy and still. The kind of night where every sound feels too loud. Ruiz sat alone in her car outside the funeral home, the engine ticking as it cooled. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. She had told herself to go home, to let it go, but Max's broken bark still echoed in her ears. She slammed her hands on the steering wheel and whispered, "I can't." Ruiz opened the car door and stepped into the cold. Her boots crunched against the gravel as she walked toward the dim building. A faint light glowed inside, barely enough to see. She pushed open the door. It creaked, loud in the silence. Inside, the air smelled of flowers and wood polish, and there, still lying by the coffin, was Max. He lifted his head weakly when he saw her, letting out a soft whimper, his tail giving one tiny wag. Ruiz's heart cracked. She knelt beside him, running her fingers through his fur. "You stayed," she whispered. "You never gave up." Max pressed his nose against the side of the coffin again, letting out a soft, broken sound. Ruiz looked at the coffin, her chest tight. Every part of her training told her to leave, to respect the dead, to follow orders. But her heart was screaming. She stood up, her hands shaking. "I need to know," she said out loud, her voice trembling. Max barked once, so soft it almost sounded like a breath. Ruiz paced in front of the coffin, running her fingers through her hair. Her badge felt heavy on her chest, her gun even heavier, on her belt. "What if I'm wrong?" she whispered. "What if it's nothing?" Max whined again, pawing at the wood. Ruiz squeezed her eyes shut, feeling the weight of the decision crush her. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling, and dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang once, twice. Then a tired voice answered. "Ruiz, what's wrong?" It was Officer Garcia, a rookie she trusted. "I need backup," Ruiz said, her voice shaking. "At the funeral home. Now." There was a pause. Then Garcia asked, "Ruiz, why?" She looked down at Max, who was still pressing against the coffin, still pleading. I need you to trust me," she said. Garcia didn't ask more. "On my way." Ruiz ended the call and slid the phone into her pocket. She knelt beside Max again, pressing her forehead against his. "I'm scared too, buddy, but we're in this together." Max licked her hand, his eyes full of trust. Ruiz stood up, walking slowly, around the coffin. She ran her fingers along the seam of the lid. It was sealed tight, heavy. Her heart pounded in her ears. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. We'll wait for Garcia. Then we'll open it." Max barked once, his tail thumping, weakly against the floor. Minutes dragged by like hours. Ruiz paced the room, her nerves fraying with every second. Finally, headlights flared outside. The door swung open and Garcia rushed in, his jacket half buttoned. He stopped when he saw the scene. "Ruiz, Max, the coffin. Ruiz, what's going on?" he asked, eyes wide. She swallowed hard. I think something's wrong." Garcia looked from her to Max, then to the coffin. His face paled. You think he's still alive? I don't know, Ruiz said. But Max does. Garcia hesitated. We'll get in so much trouble for this. I know, she whispered. But if we don't, and we're wrong, can you live with that? Garcia stared at the coffin, then nodded slowly. No, I can't. Ruiz grabbed a crowbar from a supply closet. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. She handed it to Garcia. Help me. Together they wedged the crowbar under the lid. The wood groaned, protesting. Max barked again, louder now, his body trembling with excitement and fear. Ruiz whispered, It's okay, Max. We're almost there. The coffin lid shifted a little. Dust floated into the air. Garcia grunted. It stuck. Ruiz pressed her shoulder against the edge and pushed with all her strength. There was a loud crack. The lid popped loose, shifting an inch. Max barked sharply, pawing at the side. Ruiz grabbed the lid and slowly lifted it. Her heart slammed in her chest as she peered inside. Officer Daniels lay there, still and pale, the flag folded across his chest. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Ruiz's knees went weak. But then Max jumped forward, sniffing frantically along the edges of the coffin. Wait, Ruiz said. Max scratched at the side wall of the coffin, his claws catching on something. Garcia leaned in. There's something there, he whispered. Ruiz reached inside, her fingers brushing against rough fabric hidden between the coffin lining and the wood. She pulled, and a small, bloody cloth bundle slipped free. Max barked sharply, wagging his tail, for the first time in days. Ruiz stared at the bundle in her hands, her heart pounding. Garcia whispered, What the heck is that? Ruiz didn't answer. She peeled back the bloody cloth, revealing a flash drive, a badge, and a crumpled, blood-stained note. Max sat back, watching her, his eyes wide and trusting. Ruiz stared down at the evidence, her mouth dry. She whispered, Daniels was trying to tell us something. Max barked once like he was saying, finally. Ruiz clutched the bundle to her chest, tears blurring her vision. We're gonna finish this, Max, she promised. I swear. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Max's soft breathing and the ticking of the clock on the wall. The truth was about to come out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Ruiz stood frozen, clutching the bloody bundle against her chest. Max sat at her side, his body still trembling but his eyes shining with hope. Garcia looked around nervously. Ruiz, we shouldn't be doing this. Ruiz shook her head. We already did. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. More officers were coming. They were angry, their faces sharp and cold. The chief stormed through the doors first, his voice like thunder. What do you think you're doing? Ruiz stood her ground. Following the truth. You broke into a coffin, he shouted. You tampered. With evidence, you disrespected a fallen officer. Ruiz lifted the bloody bundle for everyone to see. Daniels was trying to tell us something. The chief's eyes flicked to the flash drive, then hardened. Give it to me. Max barked sharply, stepping between Ruiz and the chief. Garcia swallowed, hard. Sir, maybe we should... Quiet, the chief barked. Ruiz hugged the bundle tighter. Her heart raced so fast she thought it might explode. The chief pointed at her badge. You could lose that. You could lose everything. Max let out a soft whimper, brushing his nose against Ruiz's leg, grounding her. She knelt and looked into Max's tear-filled eyes. Those eyes that had cried, fought, begged for someone to listen. She whispered, I'm not letting you down. Max wagged his tail once, slow but sure. Ruiz stood up and faced the chief. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. I'm not giving this to you. Not until we know the truth. The chief's face twisted in rage. You're done, Ruiz. Done. Garcia stepped closer to her. Ruiz, please think about this. She turned to him, her voice softer. I am thinking, Garcia. I'm thinking about Daniels, about Max, about doing what's right. Max barked once, loud enough that everyone jumped. The other officers looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other. The chief growled, "You've lost your mind." Ruiz squared her shoulders. "Maybe, but at least I still have my soul." The chief advanced on her, hand outstretched. "Hand it over. Now." Ruiz stepped back. "No." Max growled low in his throat. "Control your dog," the chief snapped. Ruiz placed her hand on Max's head, calming him. "He's more loyal than any of you." Silence fell over the room. Heavy. Bitter. The chief's face darkened. "You're suspended. Turn in your badge and your gun." Ruiz pulled her badge off her chest, her fingers trembling. She looked down at it for a long second. Then she placed it gently on the table. Her gun followed. The chief snatched them up. "Get out." Ruiz turned, her heart breaking, but when she looked down at Max, saw the hope still burning in his tired eyes. She knew she had made the right choice. Garcia called after her. "Where will you go?" She paused at the door. "Wherever the truth leads." Max barked again, following close behind her. They stepped out into the cold night. The door slammed shut behind them. Ruiz sucked in a shaky breath. "It's just you and me now, buddy." Max pressed against her side, his body warm, even though the wind cut like knives. Ruiz looked down at the bundle in her arms. The bloody cloth seemed to pulse with hidden secrets. She whispered, "We have to find out what's on this drive." Max gave a soft bark, almost like he was agreeing. Ruiz pulled out her phone, thumbs shaking as she typed. There was only one person she could trust now. She called an old friend, a tech specialist named Mia. The phone rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. "Ruiz, it's midnight." "I need your help," Ruiz said quickly. "It's urgent." Mia yawned. "What kind of help?" "I need you to crack a flash drive, right now." Mia paused. "Is this about Daniels?" Ruiz's voice cracked. "Yeah, it's bigger than I thought." Mia sighed. "All right, come over." Ruiz ended the call and pocketed her phone. She looked down at Max. "Ready?" Max wagged his tail, his eyes full of trust. They climbed into Ruiz's beat-up truck. Max curled up in the seat beside her, his head resting on her lap. As they drove through the dark, empty streets, Ruiz kept one hand on Max, feeling his steady breathing. "I don't know what we're going to find," she whispered, "but I know you saved him. Even now you're saving him." Max let out a tired sigh, closing his eyes. Ruiz blinked hard, fighting tears. "I promise, Max. I won't let them bury the truth." They reached Mia's apartment just after 1 a.m. Mia opened the door in pajamas, her hair wild. She raised an eyebrow at the sight of Max. "Nice dog," she said. "Come in." Ruiz followed her inside, clutching the flash drive like it was her last lifeline. Mia set up her laptop quickly. "All right, let's see what your ghost left behind." Max sat at Ruiz's feet, his eyes never leaving her face. Mia plugged in the drive. The screen flickered. Files appeared. Videos, documents, voice recordings. Ruiz's stomach dropped. Mia clicked on the first video. Officer Daniels' face filled the screen. He looked tired, broken. He spoke in a whisper. "If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it." Ruiz clapped a hand over her mouth, a sob escaping. Max whined, pressing his head into her lap. Daniel's voice continued. "There's corruption deep inside the force. People I trusted. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." Mia froze. "Oh my God." Ruiz could barely breathe. Daniels ended the video with a single heartbreaking plea. "Please protect Max." Ruiz buried her face in Max's fur, crying silent tears. She had been right all along, and now there was no turning back. The video of Officer Daniels' last words echoed in Ruiz's mind all night. His voice, so broken, so scared, wouldn't leave her alone. Max lay, curled up beside her on Mia's couch, too tired to move. His breathing was slow, steady, but Ruiz could feel the weight of his hope pressing on her. She brushed a hand through Max's fur and whispered, "You did good, buddy. You kept fighting." Max opened one eye and gave a soft, tired wag of his tail. Mia unplugged the flash drive, her face pale. "You sure you want to keep going, Ruiz? This is dangerous." Ruiz tightened her jaw. "I have to. Daniels trusted me. Max trusted me." Mia nodded slowly. "Be careful." Ruiz scooped Max up into her arms. He was lighter than he should have been. Too many days without food. Too many nights of heartbreak. Outside, the night was thick with mist. Ruiz's truck rattled down the empty streets toward the funeral home. Her hands gripped the wheel so tight. They hurt. Max rested his head on her lap, letting out a soft whimper. "I know," she whispered. "We have to finish this." She parked behind the funeral home, killing the headlights. Everything was dark except for one small security light flickering near the back door. Ruiz slipped out of the truck, Max following close. Behind. The door creaked open. No alarms, no cameras. She moved quickly, heart pounding so loud she thought it might give her away. The main room was silent. The coffin still stood there, waiting. Ruiz grabbed a crowbar from a janitor's closet. Max whimpered at her feet, pawing at her leg. "I'm here, Max," she whispered. "We're doing this together." She knelt by the coffin and wedged the crowbar under the lid. The wood groaned under the pressure. Max barked once, sharp and anxious. "I know, buddy. I'm hurrying." She pressed harder. Sweat dripped down her back. Her muscles burned. Finally, with a loud crack, the lid shifted. Ruiz dropped the crowbar, breathing hard. She looked at Max. "Ready?" Max let out a soft bark. Ruiz grabbed the edge of the lid and slowly lifted it. At first, all she saw was Officer Daniels' still body, wrapped in his dress uniform. His face was pale, peaceful, almost like he was sleeping. Ruiz's throat tightened. "I'm sorry, partner," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." But then Max leaped forward, jumping into the coffin. "Max! No!" Ruiz hissed, reaching for him. But Max ignored her. He began digging frantically at the side of the coffin, scratching and pawing like he was trying to dig through the wood. Ruiz's heart slammed in her chest. "What is it, boy?" Max scratched harder, his nails catching on something hidden between the coffin lining and the wood. Then, a soft thud. Something small and heavy dropped into the bottom of the coffin. Ruiz reached down, her hands shaking, and pulled it out. It was a package wrapped in dirty, blood-stained cloth. She stared at it, her whole body frozen. Max whined, pressing his nose against the bundle. Ruiz's voice was barely a whisper. "You found it, Max. You found it." Her hands trembled as she unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a flash drive, a police badge uncovered in blood, and a crumpled note. The words on the note were smeared, but one sentence was clear. "If you're reading this, they got me." Ruiz covered, her mouth choking back a sob. Max whimpered, leaning into her. She hugged him tight. "We were right, Max. You were right." Footsteps echoed outside. Voices. Ruiz's heart stopped. "They're coming," she whispered. Max barked softly as if telling her to hurry. She wrapped the bloody cloth back around the evidence and tucked it inside her jacket. The coffin lid hung open, the truth exposed. Ruiz looked down at Daniels's face. "One last time. I promise you I'll finish what you started." Max barked once, short and sharp. The voices grew louder, closer. Ruiz grabbed Max and sprinted for the back door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Outside, the cold air slapped her in the face. Her boots pounded the pavement as she ran. Max tucked tightly against her chest. The truck roared to life on the first try. Ruiz floored it, tires squealing. In the rearview mirror, she saw flashlights waving, officers spilling out of the building. But they were too late. Max whined in her lap, his eyes wide and scared. "It's okay, buddy," she gasped. "We've got it. We've got the truth." Max gave a tiny wag of his tail, his head resting against her. Ruiz drove fast, heart pounding, hands slick with sweat. She didn't know where they were going yet. All she knew was they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. Not when Officer Daniels' last hope, his loyal dog, had never given up. The night swallowed them whole as they disappeared into the darkness, chasing the truth, with Max leading the way. The truck rattled down the dark road, Ruiz gripping the steering wheel with one hand, the other wrapped tightly around Max. The bloody cloth bundle sat on the seat beside them, like it was alive, like it was breathing secrets. Ruiz whispered, "Hold on, Max. We're almost there." Max gave a weak bark, his head still resting in her lap. They pulled into Mia's apartment just before dawn. Ruiz scooped Max into her arms and rushed up the stairs, the evidence clutched close. Mia opened the door, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you get it?" Ruiz nodded, heart pounding. "We have it, but they're coming." Mia pulled them inside and locked the door. The apartment smelled of old coffee and fear. Ruiz placed the bloody cloth on the table, her hands trembling. Max lay down at her feet, his body tired, but his eyes locked on her, full of trust. Mia unwrapped the cloth slowly. The flash drive slipped out along with the bloodied badge and the crumpled note. She picked up the note first, squinting to read the smeared words. Her voice cracked. He knew he was going to die. Ruiz wiped her face, fighting the tears. "We have to see what's on the drive." Mia grabbed her laptop and plugged in the USB. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a single video file popped up. Ruiz knelt beside Max, her hand resting on his fur, grounding herself. Mia clicked on the video. The screen flickered, and Officer Daniel's face appeared. He looked tired, broken. His uniform was stained, his face lined with fear. He spoke in a whisper. "If you're seeing this, I'm already gone." Ruiz's chest tightened. Max whined softly, nudging her hand. Daniels continued. "I found something bad. People I trusted. People in our department. They're dirty." Mia gasped. "Oh my God." Ruiz leaned closer, her heart hammering. Daniel's voice shook as he spoke. "I tried to report it, they told me to drop it, then the threat started, the video flickered." Daniels wiped a shaky hand over his face. "I couldn't leave it alone," he whispered. "Too many lives ruined. Too many lies." He held up a second flash drive. "Everything's on here. Names, records, proof." Ruiz squeezed Max tighter. Tears blurred her vision. Daniel's voice broke. "I was scared, but Max kept me strong." Max let out a soft bark, almost like he recognized his name. Daniel smiled a little. "He's smarter than most people I know." The screen flickered again. Daniel's face hardened. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." Ruiz covered her mouth, trying not to sob. Daniels finished with a whisper. "Protect Max. Trust him. Trust your heart." The video ended. The screen went black. Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. Mia wiped her eyes. He knew. He knew they were coming for him. Ruiz nodded, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under her. Max whined, pressing his head into her lap. Ruiz hugged him close. "You tried to tell us. You never gave up." Mia unplugged the flash drive, her hands shaking. "What are we going to do?" Ruiz stood up slowly, her knees weak. "We're going to finish what he started." Mia looked terrified. "They'll come after you too." Ruiz wiped her face and whispered, "Let them." Max barked once, soft but fierce. Ruiz crouched beside him, looking into his eyes. "You're the bravest. One here, buddy." Max licked her face, tail thumping weakly against the floor. Ruiz turned to Mia. "We need to copy the files, spread them, get them somewhere safe." Mia nodded, already moving to grab another drive. Ruiz stared out the window, the sky turning pink with dawn. Somewhere out there, the people who killed Daniels were watching, waiting. But Ruiz wasn't afraid anymore, not with Max beside her, not with Daniel's voice still ringing in her ears. She pulled the bloodied badge from the table, closing her fingers around it. "I promise you," she whispered, We're gonna take them down. Max barked again, louder this time. Mia handed her a second flash drive. Here, back up. Ruiz slipped it into her pocket. We'll need to move fast. Max stood up slowly, his body shaky, but his spirit strong. Ruiz smiled at him through her tears. I'm following you, Max. Lead the way. They didn't have much time, but they had the truth, and sometimes the truth was enough to change everything. Ruiz sat at her kitchen table, the cold cup of coffee long forgotten, as she stared at the computer screen. The files on Daniel's flash drive were still open, the names, the dates, the connections. It was all laid out in front of her. Her hands shook as she scrolled through document after document. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Some of the highest-ranked officers in the department, people she'd trusted, were listed. People she'd respected, and there at the top of the list was her mentor, Captain Hawkins, her stomach twisted. No, it can't be, she whispered, unable to finish the thought. Max sat beside her, his head resting on her lap. He'd been quiet for hours, but now he lifted his head and looked up at her with those big, trusting eyes. He whined softly, as if sensing her pain. She ran her fingers through his fur, the tears finally falling. They were all in on it. They killed Daniels. They killed him to keep this quiet. Max licked her hand, his tail giving a gentle thump against the floor. Her chest tightened. She could hear Daniels's voice in her head again, warning her to trust Max. He'd known something like this might happen, and Max had never wavered. The truth was staring her right in the face, and yet, it was so hard to accept. She had to face the reality of it, no matter how much it tore her apart. Her mentor, the man who had taught her everything about the Force, about loyalty, about honor. He was one of them. Ruiz buried her face in her hands, trying to hold back the flood of emotions, but it was too much. Max nudged her hand again, his whine soft, almost pleading. She lifted her head, looking into his eyes, and she felt a small spark of strength. He was here with her. He wasn't going to give up, and neither could she. Max, she whispered, we have to do this. We have to bring them down. Max gave a soft bark as if to say, I'm with you. Ruiz wiped her eyes and stood up. The betrayal was too deep. She couldn't just sit here anymore. She grabbed the flash drive, tucked it into her jacket pocket, and picked up the phone. She dialed Mia's number. The phone rang once, twice. Mia, it's Ruiz, she said when Mia answered. I need you to meet me. It's time. Mia's voice trembled on the other end. What's going on? Ruiz took a deep breath. I know who's behind it. I know who killed Daniels, and I'm going to make sure they pay. Max stood up beside her, his eyes never leaving her face. Okay, Mia replied, her voice steady now. I'll be there. You sure you're ready for this? Ruiz nodded, even though Mia couldn't see her. I have to be, for Daniels, for Max. Max barked softly, as if agreeing with her. Later that night, Ruiz and Max sat in the shadows of a quiet alley behind Mia's apartment. The city was asleep, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. But Ruiz couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every movement, every shadow felt like it could be someone coming for them. She could hear Max's soft breathing beside her, his fur warm against her leg. Despite the fear gnawing at her insides, his presence was a steadying force. Mia pulled up in a beat-up sedan, the headlights cutting through the darkness. She stepped out of the car, her face serious. You ready? She asked, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Ruiz gave a small nod. Let's get it done. Mia unlocked the car and pulled out a small portable drive. I've already made copies of everything, but we need to get this to someone we can trust. Ruiz looked down at Max, his eyes filled with understanding. I know where to go. I just hope we're not too late. They walked toward the back entrance of an old building. Ruiz's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. They were about to expose the truth, and there was no turning back. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the walls cluttered with old files and scattered paperwork. The air was thick with dust, as if the truth had been hiding here for years. Mia placed the drive on the desk and turned to Ruiz. "You sure about this? If we do this, there's no going back. They'll come after us." Ruiz glanced at Max, who sat by her feet, his tail slowly wagging. She nodded. "We don't have a choice anymore." Daniels didn't have a choice. He trusted me, and now it's my turn to trust what he left behind. Max barked softly. Ruiz smiled weakly. "I know, buddy. We're doing the right thing." Mia hesitated before pulling out her phone. She dialed a number Ruiz didn't recognize, her face tight with nerves. "We've got the evidence. It's time." After a long pause, Mia nodded, pressing the phone to her ear. "All right, I'll make sure it gets to the right people." Ruiz watched her closely, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Will they really protect us? Mia looked at Ruiz, her face grim. They'll have to. There's no way they can ignore this. Not now. As they made their way back to the car, Max kept close to Ruiz, his head pressed against her leg. She knew deep down that they couldn't stop now, not with everything at stake. "I won't let them get away with this," Ruiz said, her voice firm. Max barked again, as if saying, "I believe you." And Ruiz knew, with Max by her side, they would see this through to the end. Ruiz sat in the dim light of her small living room, her hands shaking as she stared at the computer screen. The evidence Daniels had left behind, names, records, voices, was now in the hands of the media. The world would know the truth, but so would the men who killed him. She glanced at Max, curled up beside her feet, his eyes alert and watchful. He hadn't moved in hours. Neither of them had. She could feel the tension building, the fear coiling in her chest. The phone buzzed on the table. Ruiz picked it up and saw the message flash across the screen. "They know. They're coming for you." Her heart stopped. She turned to Max, his ears twitching. His gaze never wavered from her face, like he already knew. "Max, we did it," Ruiz whispered. "The truth is out, but they won't stop until we're silenced." Max's eyes locked with hers, his tail stiff. He let out a soft growl, a warning, his body coiled with readiness. The doorbell rang. A chill ran down Ruiz's spine. She wasn't expecting anyone. Max's growl deepened. She slowly stood up, her breath caught in her throat. "Stay here, Max. I'll check." She crept to the door, glancing through the peephole. There were no familiar faces, just shadows, dark shapes moving around the yard. "Who is it?" she called, her voice steady but her heart pounding. A voice on the other side of the door hissed, "Open up, Ruiz. We need to talk." Ruiz felt her stomach twist. She didn't need to open the door to know who it was. The same men who had killed Daniels were outside. She could hear their low voices, their threats carried on the wind. She backed away from the door, her mind racing. Max barked sharply, his body tense. "I won't let them take you," she muttered to herself. Max barked again, louder this time, his stance defensive. Ruiz knew what he was saying. We're not backing down. The banging on the door grew louder, desperate. Ruiz grabbed her phone and dialed Mia's number. "Mia," she said, her voice tight. "They're here. I don't know how much time we have. Call the others, tell them to hurry." Mia's voice trembled. "Are you sure they're the ones, Ruiz? Be careful." "I'm sure. They won't stop until they erase us." Ruiz turned to Max, who was now pacing the room, eyes scanning every corner, ears flicking at every noise outside. "I'll handle this, Mia. Just get help. Now." Max's growl was low, almost inaudible, but the weight of it hung in the air like a warning. Ruiz walked to the window, peering through the blinds. The officers were circling her house now, their faces hidden in the shadows. She felt her heart race, but she knew what she had to do. Max stood by her side, barking fiercely at the window. His body was ready. She could feel his loyalty, his unwavering belief in what they were doing. "Not today," Ruiz muttered to herself. "Not while I have you." The banging on the door was louder now, urgent. Ruiz took a deep breath, then stepped back from the window. She grabbed her gun from the drawer and checked it, though she knew she wasn't going to fire it. Not unless she had to. She didn't. Want this to end in violence. Max, stay close, she whispered. Max barked one last time, the sound echoing through the house. Just then, the door crashed open. Ruiz's heart skipped a beat, but Max was already charging toward the doorway, teeth, bared fur bristling. Get back, Ruiz, a voice ordered from the darkened doorway. Max lunged, his growl shaking the air, but Ruiz grabbed his collar, pulling him back. No, Max, not yet. The officer stepped inside, his face covered in a shadow. We've got orders. To bring you in. Hand over the evidence. Ruiz didn't flinch. You think I'm just going to hand it over? The officer sneered. You have no idea what you're up against. We can make this all go away for you. Just give us what we want. Max's growl deepened, louder this time, warning them to back off. The officer took a step forward. You don't want to make this harder, Ruiz. Just then, headlights flashed through the windows. Another car pulled up outside. More voices echoed from the yard. The officer at the door froze. Don't make a move, Ruiz warned. Max's tail was stiff, his stance strong. Ruiz could feel his protective instinct. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her. The officer looked past her toward the approaching figures. His face paled. Then the door crashed open again. But this time, it wasn't the corrupt officers. It was a group of honest cops, ones who had secretly been watching, waiting for a moment like this. They stormed in, guns drawn but not aimed. They weren't there to fight. They were there to help. One of them, a familiar face, stepped forward. Officer Garcia, the rookie she had trusted. It's over, he said, his voice low but firm. We've got your back, Ruiz. The corrupt officer backed away slowly, realizing he was outnumbered. Max stood tall, his eyes never leaving the officer's face, his body tense. He knew the threat had passed. Ruiz lowered her gun, her heart still racing. Thank you, she whispered, relief washing over her. Garcia stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. We've got the files. We've got the proof. Daniel's death won't be in vain. Max barked once, then sat at her feet, his tail wagging softly. Ruiz looked down, at him, tears in her eyes. We did it, buddy. And for the first time in days, she let herself believe that the fight for justice was far from over. The news spread fast. The story of corruption, betrayal, and murder made headlines across the nation. Daniel's name was finally cleared, his sacrifice no longer in vain. The officers who had covered up the truth were arrested, their world of lies crumbling in the light of justice. Ruiz watched it all unfold, the weight of the truth finally lifting off her shoulders. She stood by the television, her eyes fixed on the screen where Daniel's name was being honored. His face appeared, brave, strong, the way she remembered him before everything changed. Max sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the screen too. He had been with her through it all, through the danger, the fear, the heartache. He had never left her side. A ceremony was held in Daniel's honor. A second funeral. This one was different. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a celebration. A celebration of the truth, of bravery, of loyalty. The crowd gathered in a large hall, tears streaming down faces as Daniel's achievements were recounted. Ruiz stood at the front, Max at her side. He was quiet now, but there was something in his eyes, a calm understanding. Officer Daniels, the speaker's voice echoed, was a hero, not only to us but to the truth he fought to protect. Today we honor his legacy. Max stood tall beside Ruiz, his fur shiny and his eyes proud. It felt as if Daniel's spirit was with them, walking beside them, urging them forward. Max barked once, soft, almost like a salute, his head raised high. The crowd went silent, the air thick with emotion. Ruiz wiped her eyes, her hand resting on Max's head. I promised him, she whispered, that I'd protect you, just like you protected him. Max turned his head to look at her, his gaze gentle, yet resolute. He understood her words, understood the promise. He had always been more than a dog. He had been a partner, a protector. The ceremony continued, but Ruiz couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She had fought for justice. They had fought for Daniels. And now they were free. As the ceremony drew to a close, Ruiz stepped forward. She walked up to the podium, Max by her side. The crowd was still, waiting for her words. Daniels didn't just die for the truth, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. He died for all of us. He died for Max, for me, for everyone who ever believed in what was right. She turned to Max, her eyes meeting his. You were his best friend, his partner, and you'll always be mine. Max's tail wagged once, slowly, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. The crowd was silent, and then, one by one, people began to clap. It wasn't just for Daniels anymore. It was for the courage that had come from all of them, for the strength they had found in the face of darkness. Ruiz stepped down from the podium and the ceremony ended. People began to leave, but Ruiz stood still, holding Max's leash in her hand, feeling the weight of everything they had overcome. Later that day, Ruiz stood at the gravesite with Max. She looked down at the fresh earth covering Daniel's coffin, her heart heavy with both sorrow and relief. Max sat beside her, his head resting on her knee. It felt like the world had finally stopped spinning, like everything was falling into place. She leaned down and whispered into his ear, "We did it, Max. We did it for him." Max barked once softly. It wasn't a loud, excited bark. It was quiet, satisfied, almost like a final goodbye. Tears filled Ruiz's eyes as she looked at the people who had gathered to honor Daniels. Their faces were full of gratitude and relief. They had witnessed the truth, and they knew who the real heroes were. Max, always the quiet one, stood up beside her and looked out at the crowd. It was as if he knew that his part in this story was over. He had fulfilled his purpose. He had helped bring justice to the man who had loved him, to the man who had trusted him. The crowd had already begun to disperse, but a few people lingered. They came up to Ruiz and Max, some of them offering kind words, others just offering a nod of respect. Ruiz bent down to Max, her voice soft. "From now on, it's just you and me. Together, always." Max sat down at her feet, his tail wagging lazily. His work was done. The fight for justice had been won. And now, it was time to move forward, to start a new chapter. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, Ruiz looked down at the golden retriever who had been her partner, her protector, and her friend. "Thank you, Max," she whispered, "for everything." Max turned his head to look up at her, his eyes full of trust. He didn't need words to tell her what he was feeling. He had always been there for her. And now, they were free to live the life they deserved. Max barked once, softly, almost like a goodbye. But this time it wasn't sad. It was peaceful. It was a promise. And as Ruiz walked away from the gravesite, Max by her side, she knew they had both earned their peace. Together.